This is Arwen's story, and it's about trouble in Fairyland. It was a grey, rainy day, and it was Arwen's turn to tell a story. She was pleased and excited. "I could tell you the one about the pine cone," she said to her big sister Willow, "but I'm not sure how it ends yet." "All right," said Willow. The fair-headed Alowan, who was only 2, was sitting on the floor piling up some blocks, then knocking them over. She could do this for quite a long time before she wanted a story to be read to her. "I'm not quite sure how this one starts either," explained Arwen. She had blue eyes like Willow and little Alowan with acorn brown plaits. Willow had fair hair like ripening corn. There was silence. Arwen was now beginning to look worried. "Why don't you just start at the beginning?" suggested Willow helpfully. "Yes, but I'm not sure what is the beginning," said Arwen. "Is it the one about the walnut boats?" asked Willow. Arwen's face brightened. "Yes. Not yet, though, but it will be sometime soon. I just have to think about it." "All right," said Willow patiently. "What happened in this new one?" "Well," began Arwen, "you see..." Then she brightened up and nodded to herself. "Once upon a time, the Fairy Queen gave a big birthday party," she said happily. "Was this in Fairyland?" asked Willow. "Yes," said Arwen. "All the fairies in the world couldn't come because there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. They live everywhere, even in very cold lands where they wear tiny fur coats. These," she explained, "are made from the skins of the little hairy caterpillars. They shed them as they grow bigger and need a new one." "So," she thought for a moment. "The ones that came were the ones who live in the fields nearby, looking after the flowers and trees. They had been very busy indeed right throughout the summer, so the Fairy Queen wanted to give them a reward." "That was nice of her," said Willow. "Yes," said Arwen. Then she stopped to think again. Alowan looked up and smiled triumphantly. "Mine," she said. She had piled 5 blocks on top of one another without their falling over. "Mine" was now her favourite word. Then she pushed them over and laughed. "Clever girl," said Willow, as the little girl scrambled for them to build another pile. "So she made them a very big birthday cake," went on Arwen. "There were lots of cakes, but this was the very biggest. It had 600 candles. That's because there were 600 fairies that came and they all had a piece." When Willow nodded and smiled. "What did they do at the party?" "They played games. They played Hunt the Thimble, where they all had to turn their backs and they weren't allowed to look. They used an acorn for a thimble. They also played statues, where everyone dances when the music's playing, but when it stops suddenly you have to stand very, very still." "I know," said Willow, "and the first one who wobbles a bit or falls over is out." The girls laughed. So did little Alowan, who now came crawling over and climbed up on the couch beside Arwen to listen. "Yes," agreed Arwen. "Then they played hide and seek. Oh yes, and pass the parcel." She stopped to think a moment. It was a huge parcel, because all the trees in the wood nearby had given the Fairy Queen one of their leaves to wrap around the parcel, so that the tiny magic ring inside the very last parcel would look as if it was really huge. But it wasn't. She smiled. Each time the music stopped, the fairy who was holding the parcel would take off one leaf and then pass it on to the next fairy. And when the music stopped again, that fairy who was holding the parcel would take off one more leaf, and so on. "It would have been a very small parcel at the end," observed Willow. Alowan looked up at them both, her eyes round and wondering. "And who won? And why was the ring magic?" I'm just trying to remember," said Arwen. "Have you forgotten?" Willow felt anxious. "No, not really. It's just that this might have to go into another story." Arwen again stopped a little to think. "It's because something happened that worried everybody," she suddenly added, "and it's made me forget a bit. The trouble was when the party was over." She nodded, as if remembering it all. "Well, what was it?" "Well, a tiny grey mouse who had been watching from behind a bush was a bit cross, because sometimes she had given the fairies rides for fun, especially the fairy children, when they got a bit bored with their usual games. So I'm afraid she did something very naughty. What did she do? And now Elowen's little face was worried too. Willow? She asked anxiously, looking up at her big sister. Willow put her arm around her. Don't worry, she said, giving her a hug. It will all come out right, won't it, Arwen? I think so, said Arwen doubtfully, but she really was very naughty. What she did was this. She went and she nibbled a hole in everybody's little shoes. The fairies had taken them off before they went into the palace of the Fairy Queen, as they were given special silver dancing slippers there, so that they wouldn't fly away by accident. You see, the little shoes that they had taken off outside were the ones that helped them to fly and still stay invisible. Yes, she said, looking up at the sky through the window opposite the couch on which they were all sitting. It looked as if the sun might be trying to break through. Elowen had gone very quiet, as if understanding it all. It was almost as if she was remembering, too, the way she stared at Arwen, who again nodded to herself and went on. Anyway, every little fairy had her own special pair of shoes. The flower fairies, the woodland fairies, the fairies of the streams and ponds, and the wayside fairies that look after very small flowers, so small we wouldn't even see them, asked Willow. Like Speedwell? Mummy showed us. It grows beside paths where people walk. Yes, agreed Arwen, or the scarlet pimpernel, the little red ones which close when it's going to rain, and lots of others. They were all beautiful, she went on hastily as she saw Willow getting ready to say something else. They were all beautiful, she repeated, in all different colours. Boo, said Elowen suddenly, only it sounded more like woo, because she was still learning to talk properly. Blue. Both of her sisters looked at her in astonishment. How did you know that, baby? Asked Arwen, but the little girl just beamed. I think blue's her favourite colour, explained Willow. She loves her blue balloon. Anyway, what happened next? Well, it was awful, continued Arwen. You see, those little fairies were horrified when they saw that each of their shoes had a hole nibbled right through. What were they going to do? They were all very upset because they knew they had to be home by dawn. Now they would not be able to fly properly, and none of them would be really invisible any more. Some of the magic in each little shoe would have gone out through the hole. Now, for example, and Arwen looked really worried, if an owl, flying across the fields just before dawn, saw something small also flying near the ground, he could make a terrible mistake. He could swoop straight down and swallow a fairy without even realising what he was doing, though he would be dreadfully upset afterwards. Or a hawk, suggested Willow. There could be one in the sky. Seeing something which looks like a little bird beneath him down low, he could dive right on it, thinking it was something he could eat. Yes, agreed Arwen. No wonder the little fairies cried. Quick, then what did they do? Well, as soon as she heard the little fairies all crying, the tiny grey mouse who had been hiding under a bush nearby started to cry too. She had thought it would serve the fairies right because they hadn't invited her. Arwen sighed. But she hadn't really thought hard enough about the fact that although the fairies did sometimes have parties for the little creatures of the land, this was really the Fairy Queen's own birthday party, and so this time it was just for the fairies. Only now, continued Arwen, her eyes wide in dismay, did that silly mouse realise what she had done, but it was too late to undo it. Willow bit her lip in worry, and Elowen, looking up at her big sister, looked as if she was going to cry. I hope this is going to have a happy ending, said Willow. I think so, said Arwen, but her mind was now miles away as she went on. Well, as soon as that mouse started to cry, and cry louder and louder, the fairies discovered it hiding under the bush. It got a very big telling off from the Fairy Queen, but then it wept so much and was really so very, very sorry that they said they forgave it. But how were the little fairies to get home safely? Asked Willow. It's a bit late to be sorry afterwards, and she frowned. Well, there was a way, said Arwen, looking pleased. Elowen smiled and clapped her hands. Willow looked at her in wonder. "It's as if she knows," she said. "Do you, little one?" giving her a hug, as Owen went on. They thought about everything, even about sailing little walnut boats, their shell boats, down the magic little streams that run from Fairyland, but they didn't have enough. And although the Fairy Queen said that her little maids and her spider friends would be able to make them a new pair of shoes each by the following night, this didn't solve the problem of how they were going to get home that night. Owen shook her head before she went on. "Well, when the little grey mouse had finally stopped crying and saying sorry, she wiped her eyes and said, 'I know.'" They looked at her hopefully, and then she explained that she had dozens and dozens of tiny little field mice friends whom she could call to come quickly to carry each little fairy safely home through their little underground tunnels so nobody could see them. On the next night, she promised, each of them would bring back the fairy he or she had carried home for the Fairy Queen to give them their new shoes. What happened then? Was it all right? Willow asked. And now little Alowan was smiling and nodding. Yes, it worked. None of them could think of a better plan. So when the grey mouse had apologised once more, she ran off into the woodlands. They heard all sorts of squeaking and chattering in the distance, but it wasn't long until they heard the pattering of tiny feet and dozens and dozens and dozens of very small mice, every shade of grey and brown, and even 2 little white mice, and 1 black one, she added, came scampering into the clearing where the fairies had left their shoes, just outside the Fairy Queen's palace. Already the moon had sailed a long way across the sky, which was growing a little lighter. So the Fairy Queen said, "Quickly, my children," and waved her golden wand, which matched her beautiful gold crown. Owen smiled happily, and in a moment each fairy found herself sitting on the back of a tiny mouse, lying low if it was a very small fairy, and holding on tight, up around the mouse's neck. "The bigger fairies would be able to sit up," said Willow firmly, and beside her Alowan nodded. "Yes," she said. Her sisters looked at her in astonishment. "She has golden hair, just like the Fairy Queen," said Owen. "Hasn't she, Willow?" Alowan beamed. Then she slid down off the couch as if she already knew the end of the story. She went back over to her pile of blocks and began to put them all away, one by one. "1," she said. "1. 1. "She can't count yet," said Owen. Then she nodded. Yes, the bigger fairies sat up and waved to one another and blew kisses to the Fairy Queen. They were pleased to think they'd all be coming back tomorrow night to meet once more. Some of them worked a long way away from the others, so it was almost worthwhile to have this adventure. "Is that all?" asked Willow. Alowan, too, looked up from where she was putting away the blocks. "Not quite," remembered Owen. "You see, when all the little field mice came the following night, safely bringing back the fairies riding on their backs, they found to their surprise that there was a wonderful feast waiting for them. Each mouse had its own special place, with the tiniest little sandwiches and cupcakes and delicious fruit that you would ever see, with some cordial made from fresh raspberries, and a little leaf purse with some chocolate to take home for the family. Even the little grey mouse, who kept trying to apologise again and again until they all said not to worry, please, because they were a bit sick of hearing her say the same thing. Even the little grey mouse got lots of hugs so that her feelings weren't hurt any more. At last she was happy too. "And that's the end," said Owen firmly, as their mother came into the room. "Sun's out," she said. "Time for fresh air." They all scrambled up. "That's a good story," said Willow, smiling. "Thank you." "Thank you," said Alowan, smiling as well. As she ran out the door, the 2 sisters looked at one another. "Heavens," said Owen. "She knew," said Willow. And they both nodded.